Metals were one of the things I was never able to get right and almost gave up trying to learn how to do them. I will see a cool paint job, try to copy it thinking I knew better, and then shit happened. On top of that, many miniatures have a lot of different parts that need to be painted with metals. Pros: showcase using non-metallic metals as the goal for painting metals in your miniatures, but is it really necessary to do that in order to get decently painted miniatures to play with? The answer is no. You don't have to do that. You do not need airbrushes, awesome brush skills, or deep knowledge of how light reflects on surfaces. In fact, I can tell you one more thing. You only need one single metallic paint. My name is Miguel, this is Rusty Wash, and on this video I'm going to show you how to paint your metals from shiny to rusty using a very simple method that requires just one single metallic paint. Buckle up, brush slicker, because it is gonna be a wild ride. For all metal painting, we need to settle on one particular metallic paint. The idea is to get something with decent coverage and a nice light silver color. With good coverage, we can save time, and with a light color, we can do more than what we can do with a darker one. It is easier to darken metallic paint than to raise its value or make it lighter. Because metallic paints are quite different from normal paints, trying to do mixes with them is bound to fail. Metallic paints comprise flakes of metallic pigments which, when drying, start to lay down parallel to the surface we are painting. In other words, your metallic paint is made of very finely ground into flakes material like aluminum, zinc or mica, and this will dry, creating many small mirrors that will then reflect light, tricking your brain into thinking it is metal. Very clever stuff. However, if you mix other paints with your metallics, you will alter the composition and screw up the magic inside of them that makes them shiny. How to avoid this and still get cool metallic colors? Washes. Using contrast colors or inks lets the light go through them and still get reflected in a way that the metal shine is still visible underneath. The trick is wash on top, don't mix them up. So for this video I have experimented with different combinations to create a comprehensive list of effects and metals that you, my dear subscriber, can now also emulate. Wait, what do you mean you are not subscribed? Click on that button, you heathen, and welcome to the congregation of Mike McVeigh adorers. This is totally not a sect. Totally. Let's get to it, my brothers and sisters. For painting metals, there are three key techniques that you will need to know: the edge highlight, the dry brush, and the stippling. Each one of these creates different appearances on what we will do. Highlight placement also changes the way we perceive the metal we are painting. To the naked eye and from a distance, those highlights will trick us into believing that the blade is crudely sharpened, that there are light chips or chinks on an armor. It all boils down to how you place and paint those small lines with your detail brush. Depending on the area you will be painting, you can do it separately or prime your whole mini with metal, like when your miniature has a lot of metal surfaces. In this case, you can always use an airbrush or a rattle can spray paint to begin with. You can even do zenithal priming like this, and then come back and do a quick dry brush on those areas that you missed with your first coat of metallic paint. Let's start with the three main hues of common metals. For steel, I normally shade with brown and black colors. I prefer translucent washes like Nuln Oil, Basilicanum Grey, Seraphim Sepia, and Agrax Earth Shade. Sometimes I water them down further to lower the saturation level of the pigment. On the other hand, if we use Ethermatic Blue or a light blue color, we will get a very cool effect, but we will talk about that later. Black washes make the metal look old, oiled, or burnt. Brown washes, on the other hand, make it look dirty or slightly rusty. Moreover, if you use Seraphim Sepia, because of its yellowish tinge, you might end up with a different metal altogether. Which brings me to the next one. For brass and gold, I have found out that using yellow washes works best, but you need to use one with a brown tinge to it. Nazareth Yellow is my absolute favorite for this. Seraphim Sepia works well for brass, whereas Nazareth creates a super appealing gold color. Copper and bronze, on the other hand, need the richness and depth of gold, but also the orange-reddish hue that makes it different. My paint of choice for this is Gryph-hound Orange. Right now we are at the most basic level of painting our metals, but there is more to it. We might still encounter metals a little flat after the previous coat of tint. We are going to fix this using some shading and highlighting. I usually prefer highlighting first, and here is where we can do the edge highlights as needed or use dry brushing to do a big area. It all depends on the size of what I want to highlight and the effect I want to go for. You can add lots of detail to an otherwise flat area with small lines painted with your detail brush, creating an interesting effect. A makeup brush or a sponge also are great for doing dry brushing, and both create different appearances. Dry brushing is one of my favorites for quick and dirty highlights. But when I want a little more control, the subtle lines of edge highlighting and drawing those lines to create the appearance of dents and scratches are a must for me. Shading is done with washes. If you went overboard with your highlights, you definitely will want to recover that tint on the areas you don't want to look too light. You can use your original wash again, but I like the way air colors work for this, as they are way less saturated than contrast paints. Secondly, the most important aspect of shading is placement and color choice. Red is a must in gold and copper. Use it as a way to improve the contrast between light and dark areas. Further darkening with purples and dark blues create outstanding effects on all three metals. And for those deep areas, just plain black washes work best. I'd use a little flow enhancer for panel lining too. It makes life much easier. You can also go that extra mile and try to create a pseudo NMM effect by shading in the right areas of your subject of choice with the colors I propose above, as I did with my white Minotaur Space Marine armor here. Notice how I try to follow the contours of the armor with the different colors I just mentioned to try to create more volume just with the contrast of those colors used. So, to sum it all up, this is how I do my three basic metals. Pause the screen and take notes if you need to. Nurgle, Skaven, and Undead players, along with many other, need this in the miniatures. The two main types of oxidation in the metal that we're dealing with are rust and patina. Rust is when iron and steel corrode, and patina is for copper, bronze, and brass. These effects can just add a corroded appearance to a specific area of the miniature instead of all over the place. So depending on how old and exposed to the elements the metal has been, we can go into several levels of corrosion. For instance, iron and steel can be fully corroded, partially corroded, and somewhat rusty. All these three different levels are very easy to achieve. My fully corroded method of choice is starting with a reddish brown paint, then stippling some orange, followed by purple, and ending up with metallic paint of choice. The latter can be done with dry brushing, stippling, or edge highlight. The effect you want to achieve will dictate this last step. For partially corroded, I paint the base with metallic paint, then add washes with Seraphim Sepia and Agrax Earthshade or similar inks, and I can go a little further and add some extra coloring with water orange. I usually end up by using edge highlights here and add some scratches. Dry brushing works also very well and adds a distinctive granular appearance that adds age and corrosion to the look. The last one, the partially corroded look, is simply the same way we painted the steel before, but going a little heavier with the shading. Also, brown inks add that extra oomph to the rusty look. My favorites here are Black Templars and Agrax Earthshade. Patina is a little different to the rust in that the main hues are a combination between green and reddish brown. If you want to just give it a very lightly corroded look, then Nihilak Oxide is our friend. Just paint the brass as discussed before and add some touches of watered down Nihilak Oxide here and there. For ancient weaponry and armor, I have found out that painting the surface the same way I did with my iron rust and using green paints to stipple over makes it look ancient as definitely something I will use in many more miniatures in the future. Subscribe to see that. Steel changes color when it's tempered at different temperatures, and this shift in colors follow a very discernible pattern from colder to hotter temperatures. We can use this to create awesome effects in our weapons like sword blades or muzzles of plasma guns, assault cannons, etc. For the example I'm going to show here, I used the sword of this HeroQuest Dread Warrior. The colors I used were in this order. I started with Seraphim Sepia on the whole blade. I added Agrax Earthshade to the bottom half of the middle section, and then Magus Purple to the top of the middle section. To finish it off, I added Ethermatic Blue to the middle bottom of the top section and I blended towards the end. Ethermatic blue is almost a must when it comes to painting metals. The blue hue makes metals look super interesting. If you use it as it is and then edge highlight, you get tempered steel that looks sharp, hard, and clean. You can also darken it with calf blue, clear, or another translucent blue to add contrast. When we paint miniatures, one of the best things that you can do is trying to implement your own ideas. For instance, when I was painting this Space Marine, I wanted to get somewhere close to ROBOCOP's shiny blue armor. I started using ethermatic blue all over the armor, primed in silver, and then added another wash with calf blue mixed with flow enhancer and medium. When this dried, I dry brush with a sponge to regain some of the metal highlights, and I painted the details with Nasrec yellow. I finished it off by improving the shading in the deep recesses, and this was what I ended up with. I had a blast coming up with a cool and shiny color scheme for a Space Marine chapter. Watch this next, and remember, I am Miguel, this is Rush the Wash, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Un beso, adios.